Hello, everyone, and welcome back to HCI-space, a podcast where we explore the world of human-computer interactions through conversation with the people designing the future of how we live, learn, and connect with technology. I'm your host, Aditya Singh, and this week we're joined by Professor Rosa Arriaga, who is an associate professor at Georgia Tech specializing in HCI. Hi, Professor Arriaga. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So before we dive into your recent work, I'd like to start each episode with the same question. It helps us understand not just what you work on, but why. So with that in mind, how did you get into HCI? Was there a moment or project that really pulled you into this space?
Yeah, so I came into HCI kind of through the back door. And one of the great things about HCI is that it really is a place where non-computer scientists or people that don't have traditional computer science backgrounds can find a home. And that's exactly me. So my background, as you might know, is in developmental cognitive neuroscience. So pretty far away. And really, before I came to Georgia Tech, I didn't even know that HCI existed. However, as a psychologist or experimental psychologist, I know a lot about evaluation. I know a lot about, how to design studies. And it was really a great place. And whereas my PhD was in a very theoretical domain, in HCI, I was able to do things that to me were very meaningful and impactful. And, that really has been what sustained me here and what, made me stay in computer science.
So really nice to know that. But yeah, a lot of people might not even know what HCI even is. So can you explain it in a way that makes sense to high school?
Yeah. So what I tell people is that HCI is the study of designing systems that are useful and usable, right? So what makes a system useful and usable? And I always say that the easy part is the usability. The hard part is the utility. So how is it that I can build a system that's going to be useful to a psychologist or a podiatrist or a person that works with individuals that have autism? And so, that's the basic idea. How do we understand, what people's requirements are to build something that's going to improve what they're doing and streamline it?
Nice, excellent answer. Yeah. Okay, so in your study, some people actually said they didn't want AI explanations. They preferred like mystery, like one participant comparing it to a magic trick. And honestly, that kind of surprised me because I thought a lot of people would be inclined to knowing like the back processes of how like everything works. So why do you think knowing how these systems work can make the experience feel less interesting or even less fun?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start at the beginning. And I think, one of the first things we tell people when we're training HCI researchers, we say you are not your user. And so in some sense, that's your initial reaction is, wow, I would want to know. But the fact is, that, some people actually don't care about the details. And so I think that it's actually just a subset of people are happy to just, interact with systems. I don't know the way cars work very much, but I'll get in and I'll write it. And so I think, again, for us, it really just underscores that we don't know, that we're not our users, and we really have to go out there with an open mind to see what they have to say. And so for me, it was more an opportunity of, and for the first author, it was really an opportunity to say, we think about AI, and of course, AI is in the news in very high risk areas. So of course, all the issues with these chat bots and mental health contexts, and when they go wrong, right, is when we worry. But the student really wanted to understand everyday interactions with AI and what was going on. So that's the basis of that study.
I see. Yeah, I actually like, it's really interesting that you made the car analogy because I didn't think of it like that. And now that I'm kind of hearing that, like it kind of changes my perspective, and it makes sense that why people might not actually want to know like every detail. Yeah, that really like kind of changed our perspective. That's a really good analogy. But yeah, but anyway, when it comes to like teaming with AI in sensitive areas like therapy, I know like there are a lot of people here that don't have the ability to like seek mental health counselors or anything because they don't have the money. And, you know, it's just like, when it comes to these sensitive areas, you know, what are like the biggest deal breakers for people? Like the things that instantly destroy the trust between AI and humans?
Well, I think there's two things we have to understand, right? One of my favorite sayings is from a UC Berkeley computer scientist. He will often call himself the father of VR.
Yeah.
And his name is Jared Lanier. And he said, somebody asked him, eventually everybody will ask, you know, singularity, will the machine take over? Will AI take over? And he said, I don't believe in AI. People are like, what do you mean you don't believe in AI? He says, there's data, right? And there's coders. And in some sense, there's companies. And so the idea is, right, these companies exist, right, for eventually to make a profit. And so to go on there and to expect that the machine is going to, or the company is going to change the program enough for you to get off ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and you know, go and seek help. I think that you're right. I think that there's two things, right? So let's separate the problem with the lack of mental health, and then, you know, having these companies, you know, substitute for that. And we know that, you know, there's sometimes, I always say, you know, in psychology, we used to say that depression is a common cold, you know, of psychology. Everybody's going to be depressed at some point in your life, just like everybody's going to get a cold. However, there's some people that get a cold and go over it. There's other people that get a cold and they get pneumonia, and, you know, it's much worse. And so I think that, you know, that's the concern. The concern is, sure, we can count on these companies to provide these machines that will allow us to get some feedback, right? But the problem is, as you know, some of these cases have shown, people go on there to do their homework, and then they stay to do other things that really the machine is not in a position to help with.
I see. That's a good answer. But yeah, like diving deeper into the kind of therapy part of like AI being a therapist, you know, your work suggests that AI could act like a coach, a consultant, or even a teammate for therapists. And I find this exciting because, again, you know, a lot of people don't have access to these therapists that cost a lot of money. And the idea that AI could help with them just feels like so
Yeah,
powerful.
but I mean, I want to clarify, right,
Right,
that
yeah.
our funding, right, so the National Science Foundation. So first of all, big shout out for NSF. It really allows us to understand how the world works, right? And so the National Science Foundation had a big opportunity for researchers to find out about the future of work. We know that AI is going to impact the way we work. And so this particular opportunity wanted for researchers to figure out what's the future of the workplace, what's the future of the workforce, and what's the future of the worker. And so the kind of big problem that we're dealing with is that if you think about evidence-based therapy, so I'm not talking about just kind of, you know, a didactic situation. I'm talking about therapy that's been studied in experiments that have been found to actually lead to recovery from PTSD, which is the area that I work in, right? So this evidence-based therapy, we know that it works. We know that people can recover from PTSD. However, it's very time intensive and laborious to train new clinicians in this therapy type. And so I left I dropped the link to the proposal or the work that we're doing. So our work is really trying to answer the question, how can we get AI and machine learning, right, to really help us streamline the training process so we can get more humans, right, that are able to deliver gold standards of care, for example, in PTSD. So that's very different from saying that we are training, you know, AI bots to go out and, you know, and deliver therapy. So that's a very different kind of workspace. And so, again, because I'm in the research space and I'm not a therapist, right? I'm not a
Mhm.
psychologist. Well, I'm a PhD in psychology, but I'm not a clinical psychologist.
Mhm.
For me, it's really about how do we go to the next step, right? So far, machines have really been coaches. And so the next question is, can we think of the machine as a kind of a teammate, an agent that knows everything that's going on and that can streamline the process so that the humans can be optimally successful in what they do, right? So that's the difference. We're really thinking about the workforce that we're targeting is mental health workers. So they can be, again, you may not know, but if you want to be a therapist, you can get a master's in social work, a master's in family and child counseling, or you can get, a PsyD, which is like a psychology doctor, which is much more about the practice. You can get a PhD in psychology, right? And so these are very different degrees that have very different training requirements. And what we want to know is, how do we actually get these machines, right, to help us train enough of these mental health workers, right? So this workforce to actually deliver better human-to-human therapy, or get people trained to be able to deliver the gold standard of these evidence-based therapies.
So I just want to clarify. So you're making these AI models to teach therapists, or like
So
on a.
basically, we're using these models
Mhm.
currently, right? We are doing things like, or people that are getting trained have to submit a video, and then the human has to watch the video, and the human has to tag the video.
Mhm.
Well, can we get the machines to do this? Can we get, machines, for example, if one of the things that has to happen is there is a marker called a subjective unit of distress. How
Mhm.
distressed are you on a scale of 0 to 100, when 100 is like something terrible is happening to you right now, right?
Mhm.
In the process of therapy, a therapist that is providing this evidence-based therapy has to ask, what's your SUD? What's your SUD? Like every 7 minutes. So now, instead of, the human checking, did they say what's your SUD or what's the number of the person's SUD, you can now get, either some natural language processing. And now we could clearly see in the video, right, when for example, maybe the number words were said, right? And so we can automate a lot of that behavior that currently requires a human to do these kinds of things. And, one of the analogies I use is when automation, so if you think about robots, right? When robots first came into kind of common culture, we said, look, robots are to help humans do dull, dirty, and dangerous work, right? And so you can think about these machines, these AIs, doing the same thing. They're
Mhm.
helping us, take care of dull stuff. It's really dull to listen to a video. I
I
mean,
see.
to watch this video. So the machines are really streamlining and helping the humans be more efficient, right? And
Mhm.
so, again, that's a very different proposition.
I see. No, yeah. Now I get the difference. Is that you're using these AI models to just automate like tedious tasks so you can
Exactly.
expedite your work. Okay, that makes much more sense. I
Yeah.
see.
Mhm.
Okay. Is this like already being used, or is this more of like a futuristic thing?
So this is, we're entering our third year. We're entering the third year of our of our program. It's a grant that's between 3 different universities. So Georgia Tech, right? I do the human computer interaction part. We have another faculty member that's in the psychology department that's doing the organizational psychology work. That's Dr. Weiss. We have Dr. Abdullah Saeed from Penn State University. He's doing the machine learning, right? And then we have Andrew Sherrill, who basically is, the principal investigator, and he's overseeing the entire system. And so if you go on Google Scholar, you'll see that, on my Google Scholar, you'll see that, again, the different researchers are taking care of the different types of tasks on the
Mhm.
grant. And so we are starting to have evidence that there are some ways that these machine learning techniques can be used to streamline the process, or even, we talked about AI being about the data. Well, what happens if you don't have enough data? Well, one of the things that's happening now, a very popular tool, is to actually kind of create more data, right? So get data simulations to be able to, get the output you need from the machines. And so we're making progress, right? These things take a long time. So as you know, from my website, we did a, back to PTSD and machine learning and AI and ubiquitous computing. We, the project took about 4 years, right? COVID was in there, so that was an extra year. But we went all the way from characterizing it all the way to intervention, or deployment rather. So we think that in a couple of years, we're going to be able to deploy our system and see, in fact, how it is that we can streamline the process so that we can get more clinicians trained.
Oh, that's really exciting. So just in like a couple of years, we're already going to see like this futuristic step.
Yeah, definitely.
That's amazing. Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's amazing. But yeah, so coming to more of like a general topic on accountability, if something goes wrong, like a privacy issue or a biased recommendation, who should be responsible? And you think about like drawing the line between the AI, how do you think we should draw the line between the AI and the humans behind it? Are there like...
Well, that's the thing, right? So back to, AI is really companies using data. Now, as you know, the last week, another computer scientist from Georgia Tech was in the news a lot because he was studying, he studies the math of computer science, right? And so this question of hallucinations, right? Yeah. And the companies keep saying, don't worry, we're going to stop the machine from hallucinating. Well, one of the things that Professor Vempala did is he and his colleagues at OpenAI said, actually, right, this is a very complex question. And the answer is machines are going to hallucinate because, we don't have perfect data. So there's always going to be some amount of hallucination. And so the question is back to what amount of hallucination, or rather, how do we start to kind of triage? There's some areas where if the machine gets something wrong, if they say that your birthday's in August and it's really in October, right? No big deal. However, if it gives somebody bad advice about self-harm or something else equally maladaptive, right? Then there should be some lines there. And so I think that it's a hard question, but I think that we have to think about, what are the consequences? And now we know that the consequences are serious and terrible, right? So I think that we have to think about those areas where, if the machine gets it wrong, so what? But in other cases where we're looking at high risk areas, then I think we have to draw the line there.
I'd say I agree with you entirely, because right now there is a lot of hallucination in our technology, in AI models especially, and not like, I don't think any company should go out on a limb and like give out these models and say they're 100% sure it's not going to hallucinate, because if they do, then I feel like it's the company's fault as well for making such a claim that their AI model is perfect. So I think to a point,
I mean, and I have to say, in all fairness, right? It was really, bold of OpenAI to publish these papers, right? Because they're coming under scrutiny. So I think that, for example, OpenAI really cares about, or at least is trying to make inroads to security, right? So how can we think about the safeguards of these machines? And so I think that, the first thing is we have to be able to shine a light, to be able to know, what are the constraints under which this happens. And so again, kudos to OpenAI that, published this, not only published the paper, but promoted it, right? They could have like said, oh, let's put it under, some rug somewhere so nobody can find it. And so again, that's the thing about science, right? In science, we're not trying to find the answer we want. We're trying to find some aspect of the truth, or some aspect of an unguarded study. And so, I think that the studies have to continue.
Okay. Okay. So, but do you think they should they should continue to make this like statement, or they should kind of take a step back and then just do their research, and then once they're 100% sure, then kind of come back and then promote it?
Well, again, right, if you think about, we do know, right, in all fairness, and, back to the anecdote of people that are perfectly healthy, people that have common colds, and then people that will get pneumonia. I think that right now, the idea is people come on these lines, and some people, right, really find it helpful, right? And it's useful and it's usable. But the question is, under what constraints?
Okay.
And so I think that, again, this question of constraints is actually, back to what we do in HCI, right? So if you think about design, if we define design as problem solving within a set of constraints, then what are those constraints? And, as researchers, we're constantly iterating to try to understand where those constraints lie.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, and then, right, across all your studies, were there any is there like any surprises or any like cool stories you want to tell us about, like anything you might have come?
Yeah. So I guess one of my, it's one of my favorite stories because, right now, of course, we're all excited about these new techniques, right? These new mathematical or these new large language models, right? We're very excited. But, my favorite story is that one of the things I say all the time is that there was good research before AI, right?
Yeah.
And, for me, if I want to think about impact, I want to think about, well, how do you design studies that show impact with the simplest technology, right? And so for me, one of the things that I tell my students is, if you want to hit something, you don't have to find a laser, a laser pointer, or you don't have to find a laser. You can just take off your shoe and hit it. And so, how do we design those systems that are useful and usable and easy to design? And so one of my favorite studies from early on, pre-AI, is it's a paper called "A Text Message a Day Keeps the Pulmonologist Away." And so the idea was that we could design a text message system, very simple, right? So no AI, nothing. A little heuristic that would send out text messages. And the short answer is that children that had moderate to severe asthma were randomly assigned to either get a text message a day or a text message every other day. And we found that a text message a day over the period of time that they would not see a doctor, so between visits, actually led to improvements in lung function, right? Improvements in quality of life, and these statistical differences also were impactful. So it wasn't just statistics; it was actually the doctor saying, "Hey, these kids are actually doing better." And so, again, how do we, back to basic science, right? Occam's razor. How do we come up with the simplest technology? How do we come up with the simplest study so that we can try to discover all the wonderful things that are out there?
I see. I agree. I'm actually, I just read an article of Occam's razor, and yeah, thinking about it right now, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's just we complicate a lot of things, but they can just be done with the simplest things. But also had a question follow up for that, is that, do you think with AI, everything's getting a lot simpler to do, or are we overcomplicating things?
Well, I mean, I think that first of all, right, doing hard things is necessary, right? If you think about working out, it's hard, but that's how you gain muscle. So one of the things I tell, I have children myself, right, is if you're playing Minecraft and your little Minecraft guy or gal, goes out and runs a marathon, that's great, but you've gained nothing.
Right.
And so when you get the machine to do your work, right, then you're not doing the hard work of building those critical thinking skills. When you don't read the, when you don't read the book, when you get the machine to give you some streamlined notes, you're not doing the work of learning. And so, it's great when we, again, how can we automate the things that we might not care about? But, there are core processes that we need to engage in to continue to be, an educated society. And so how is it that we can, do our homework? How is it that we can get better at writing or engage in critical thinking that requires the hard work of, putting together arguments? And so I think that it's okay for some things to be easy, and maybe some of the things we decide is, what we might not, care about. But, the hard work of critical thinking requires people to spend time, getting educated, reading, hearing different perspectives. And so I think that is part of it. The other thing is, with these LLM models, sometimes they're very, the kind of SAT word is they're kind of sycophants, right? They're like, yeah, you're awesome. Somebody described it as what was it? I think it was something like a Labrador. Like, yeah, you're awesome. Yeah, I want to see you all the time, right? That was a great thought you just had. So I think that it's okay, right? Sometimes those hard conversations are really where we grow as humans. And so also, right, to have another opportunity to stay in your room and now just interact with an interface, I think that, that's where I'm afraid of the harms. It's easy, right? It's easy because if you're always with a machine that always thinks you're awesome, that's great, but there's going to be no growth there. That's what I would say.
I agree entirely, because I know I use a lot of AI in my daily tasks, and a lot of these tasks, like sometimes I always try to like do my work on time, and like whichever ones take a lot of time, I spent a lot of like discipline. I make a schedule and I do it every day to make sure it hits the deadline. But sometimes there might be a couple of assignments that might slip by. I might need to use AI, and that's why like I don't really like AI, even though I use it, because it forces, like when I'm at these circumstances, then I'm going to use AI. I'm bound to use AI. But, before this, I had to do my homework, which was bad at the time. But now realizing is that that's the time when I actually develop these skills to do the work, even though
and
it's
also resilience, right?
Exactly.
Like you had to either turn it in or deal with the consequences,
Exactly.
And so I agree, it's hard. And so I think that, but again, right, we've gone through, depending on who you talk to, right? These there's a lot of funny memes or whatever about Socrates, saying that the written word was going to ruin everything for everybody, right? He wanted to have the Socratic method. And so, I think people have always complained about technology. So I'm, of course, because of technology, people are going to be able to live longer and hopefully, have healthier lives. And so I don't want to paint everything with a swath, but, again, that we don't lose that, that person-to-person contact, right? That these systems are useful and usable within the constraints that we keep growing as individuals.
Exactly. Yeah, they're I would say there are good amounts of good side effects and bad side effects, but we're literally in the earliest stages of AI. So
yeah.
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 So what part of HCI in the future excites you the most, and what worries you?
Yeah. So, so back to, again, I always say HCI, right? HCI, user interface design, all of these things. Right now I'm doing a lot of work. It's not very exciting, but I'm doing a lot of work in diabetic foot ulcer. As you know, diabetes is a terrible, terrible problem. It has complications, one of which is diabetic ulcers, right? Some 17% of people are going to get diabetic ulcers, and then they're going to have, continuous infections. And then some subset of those people are going to have to eventually get amputations, right? Right now, there aren't enough podiatrists. If we think about places, rural California or maybe rural Georgia, where people can't access, podiatrist or get the kind of foot health they need, how do we solve that problem, right? And so once again, well, the phone is ubiquitous. Everybody has a phone. We can think about, again, what's that gold standard of care, right? So I'm not inventing anything because, on a good day, I'm a computer scientist. On a bad day, I'm definitely not a podiatrist or a clinician or a pulmonologist. And so the idea is, can we build these systems, right, to allow individuals to help, for example, their grandparents collect this data about their foot health, right? So, can we start taking pictures of the feet to see, does that scratch develop into something else? Or can we take, videos of capillary refill tests to see if maybe there's some indication that maybe the circulation is off? Or can we use the motor on the phone to check if our grandparents can feel, can have sensation in their feet? Can we get them to use the phone to do a 2-minute walk to be able to get a sense of their, how their musculoskeletal system is? And so to me, again, being able to take kind of the gold standard of care and then being able to build an app that will hopefully allow people to monitor their health, right? Again, a simple solution that, might have important and long-lasting effects. And so, the idea that we could, right now in certain communities, amputations are an absolute epidemic, right? And so one of my favorite quotes from a focus group with people that had diabetes and actually amputations was, they said, well, they kept telling me that I should monitor my sugar, monitor my sugar, monitor my sugar. Meanwhile, my feet hurt and nobody told me about it, right? And so, again, how can we make this, basic knowledge about foot health ubiquitous so that we can maybe salvage limbs? So that really excites me because, I mean, if you talk to people, people are more afraid of amputations than of death, right? It's a really terrible situation. And so, again, how do we think about these big problems with maybe simple solutions that, might have long-standing impact? And so, that's really what my research is about at the UBCOMP Health and Wellness Lab. So how do we, think about patient engagement? How do we think about continuity of care and point of care interaction? And so, those are the kinds of questions that we try to answer in my lab.
I see. Yeah, that's actually really exciting to hear about because I hadn't realized that a lot of people fear amputation or death. But, considering that's true, it's, really exciting to see how you guys are taking these steps to, prevent this in the future. So
Yeah.
that's really nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess just to wrap up,
Mhm.
if people want to know more about HCI, I usually tell people that, there's HCI by many, many names, right? Some people call it, or design, user-centered design, design thinking, user experience design. And so in the chat, I actually put in the Coursera course that I teach.
Mhm.
And so people can learn all about HCI. And this is, the great thing about Coursera and these massive open online courses is that you basically get to take the classes that people take, for example, at Tech. And so this class, the Coursera course that I put in there, basically if you Google Rosa and Coursera, you'll get my user experience design class. It's basically a subset of the material that, we teach undergrads at Georgia Tech and we teach master's and PhD students. So you can really have this basic understanding of what is the process of HCI. And so people seem to like it, almost, as you can see, almost 500,000 people have taken the course. Something like 61,000 people have completed it. And it's an easy way to really learn about the nuts and bolts of human-computer interaction.
That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so nice to meet you and keep up the good work. I always, when I think about education, I think about, even, your podcast, right? If it isn't for people like you that really get people excited about our disciplines, right? Our disciplines would just disappear. So thank you so much for being, being an advocate for HCI, and I hope to see you around.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.